Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. 23 years on the force and I thought I'd seen everything. Bodies in dumpsters, gang shootings, domestic violence cases that made your skin crawl. But what I discovered in that suburban house in Oak Ridge, Pennsylvania, during the winter of 2023, that changed something fundamental in me. The case started simple enough, just another accidental death report that landed on my desk on a cold Monday morning in February. Mrs. Eleanor Hoffman, 74, had fallen down the stairs in her own home. The responding officers noted nothing suspicious, just an elderly woman who'd lost her footing on carpeted steps. Her grandson, a quiet kid named Lucas, had found her at the bottom of the staircase when he came home from school. He was 17, skinny as a rail, with these pale gray eyes that never quite met yours when he talked. I remember driving out to the Hoffman residence that first time, thinking it would be routine paperwork. The house sat on Maple Street, one of those cookie-cutter colonials built in the 90s with beige siding and a two-car garage. Nothing special about it except for the basketball hoop in the driveway that looked like it hadn't been used in years. Lucas answered the door wearing a Penn State hoodie that swallowed his thin frame. He led me through the house to where it happened, explaining in this flat, measured voice how he'd found his grandmother. The way he described it was strange. Not upset or shocked, just clinical, like he was reading from a grocery list. He pointed to the exact spot where her head had hit the banister, mentioned the specific angle of her body, even noted that her left slipper had come off and landed 3 feet away. Most kids his age would be a mess after finding a loved one like that. But Lucas? He was taking mental notes. 3 weeks later, I was back at the same house. This time, it was Lucas's older sister, Megan. 21 years old, home from college for spring break, found dead in her bedroom. Electrocution. The initial report said she'd been using a hairdryer near a small puddle of water from a knocked-over glass on her dresser. Freak accident, everyone said. Lightning doesn't strike twice, except when it does. I found Lucas in the living room, sitting on the couch with his parents. His mother, Diane, was sobbing into his father's shoulder while Lucas stared at the wall, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. When I asked him about finding Megan, he tilted his head slightly and said, "The circuit breaker didn't trip. Isn't that weird?" That detail stuck with me. How many 17-year-olds would notice something like that in the middle of discovering their sister's body? The house felt different that second visit. Darker somehow, even though it was a bright afternoon in early March. I walked through Megan's room taking notes, trying to piece together how a smart college kid manages to electrocute herself in her childhood bedroom. The hairdryer was still on the floor where it had fallen, its cord snaking toward an outlet that looked perfectly normal. But Lucas was right. The breaker hadn't tripped. I made a note to have an electrician check the wiring. Mrs. Hoffman watched me from a family photo on Megan's desk, her kind eyes seeming to follow me around the room. Something was gnawing at me, that cop instinct you develop after years of seeing things that don't quite add up. 2 accidents in 3 weeks. Same house, same family, and the same kid finding both bodies calm as a cucumber each time. A week after Megan's funeral, I got the call that would turn this from a string of bad luck into a full-blown investigation. Mr. Hoffman, Robert, 48, construction foreman, was dead. Another fall, this time from a ladder in the garage while reaching for boxes on a high shelf. The ladder had collapsed, sending him headfirst into the concrete floor. Lucas had found him too, of course. When I arrived, the kid was sitting on the front steps, hands folded in his lap, watching the paramedics load his father's body into the ambulance. His mother was inside, sedated by a neighbor who happened to be a nurse. I sat down next to Lucas, and he looked at me with those unsettling gray eyes. 3 accidents in a month, he said quietly. What are the odds? The question sent ice through my veins. Not because he asked it, but because of how he asked it, like he already knew the answer. I spent hours in that garage photographing every angle, measuring distances, examining that ladder like it held the secrets of the universe. It was a good ladder, sturdy aluminum, the kind construction workers trust their lives to every day. But the safety locks, those little spring-loaded mechanisms that keep the ladder from collapsing, they were gone. Not broken, not worn out. Gone. Removed. Clean cuts where they should have been, like someone had taken tin snips to them. That's when I knew. This wasn't bad luck or a cursed house or whatever explanation people were whispering about at the grocery store. This was murder, dressed up in the clothing of accidents, and I had a pretty good idea who the designer was. The investigation kicked into high gear after that. I brought in a forensics team to go over the house with a fine tooth comb. We found things that made my skin crawl. The carpet at the top of the stairs where Mrs. Hoffman fell. Someone had carefully loosened the tacking strips, just enough to create a trip hazard, but not enough to be obvious. In Megan's room, we discovered the ground fault circuit interrupter on the outlet had been disabled, a simple modification that would prevent the safety mechanism from cutting power during an electrical fault. Someone had been doing their homework, learning just enough about household dangers to weaponize them. I pulled Lucas's internet history from the family computer and found searches dating back months, accidental death statistics, household electrical failures, ladder safety mechanisms, and dozens more. Each search corresponded to one of the deaths, studied and planned weeks in advance. But it was Lucas's school counselor, Mrs. Blackwood, who gave us the smoking gun. She came to the station on a Thursday afternoon, clutching a folder like it might explode. Inside were essays Lucas had written for her grief counseling sessions, supposedly to help him process the losses. Instead of grief, those pages contained detailed observations of each family member's routines, their vulnerabilities, their trust in him. One line still haunts me. Grandma always holds the railing with her right hand, but she leads with her left foot. This creates an imbalance on the third step. Written 2 weeks before Eleanor Hoffman died. Mrs. Blackwood's hands trembled as she showed me Lucas's sketches, not of happy memories or expressions of loss, but technical drawings, electrical diagrams, stress points on aluminum ladders, the anatomy of a fall. She'd been so disturbed that she'd broken confidentiality to bring them to us, probably saving Diane Hoffman's life in the process. We arrested Lucas that same evening. I'll never forget the moment we put the cuffs on him in his living room, while his mother watched in horror. He didn't resist, didn't protest his innocence, didn't even seem surprised. He just looked at me with those pale eyes and asked if he could bring his notebook to jail. When I asked him why he did it, expecting denial or tears or rage, he tilted his head like I'd asked him about the weather. "I wanted to see if I could," he said simply. Each one was a puzzle. Grandma was easy. Old people fall all the time. Megan was harder because electricity is unpredictable. Dad was the most challenging because he knew tools, knew ladders, but I figured it out. He spoke with the pride of a student explaining a science project, completely disconnected from the reality that he'd murdered 3 people who loved him. The trial was a media circus. People couldn't wrap their heads around it. A 17-year-old who'd systematically eliminated his family members like checking items off a grocery list. The prosecution presented our evidence methodically. The tampered carpet, the modified outlet, the sabotaged ladder, the journal entries, the internet searches. Lucas's lawyer tried for an insanity defense, bringing in psychiatrists who testified about antisocial personality disorder and an inability to feel empathy. But Lucas undermined his own defense every time he took the stand. He corrected technical details in the prosecution's case, explained his methods with an enthusiasm that chilled the courtroom. When shown photos of his dead family members, he studied them with the detachment of someone examining furniture. The jury took less than 2 hours to convict him on 3 counts of first-degree murder. I visited Diane Hoffman after the trial. She'd moved in with her sister in Ohio, couldn't bear to stay in Pennsylvania. We sat in her sister's kitchen, and she asked me the same question everyone asks: how did I not see it? I told her what I'd learned in my years on the force. That sometimes evil doesn't announce itself with red flags and warning signs. Sometimes it sits across from you at dinner, does its homework, says please and thank you, and plots your death between math equations. Lucas had been the perfect son, helpful and quiet, always there when someone needed him. Of course he was always there. He was waiting for his moments. Diane showed me a photo from Christmas just 2 months before Eleanor died. The whole family around the tree, Lucas in the middle, that thin smile on his face. Now I understood what that smile meant. He was already planning, already seeing them not as family but as problems to solve. Lucas is serving life without parole at the state correctional facility. I heard from a guard there that he's a model prisoner, follows every rule, causes no trouble. He's taking college courses, excelling in engineering and physics. The guard mentioned something that sent chills down my spine. Lucas had requested permission to tutor other inmates in basic electrical work. The request was denied, obviously, but it shows he hasn't changed, hasn't learned remorse or empathy. He's just waiting, studying, probably running scenarios in his head. I retired 6 months after the case closed. 23 years of murder investigations, and it was a 17-year-old boy who finally made me hang up my badge. Not because of the violence, I'd seen worse, but because of the calculation, the patience, the complete absence of humanity in those gray eyes. Sometimes I drive past the Hoffman house on Maple Street. New family lives there now, kids playing in the yard, that basketball hoop finally getting some use. They don't know what happened in those rooms, on those stairs, in that garage. And maybe that's for the best. Some houses hold memories. That one holds lessons about the kind of evil that doesn't need a reason, just an opportunity and a curious mind. The autumn of 2018 was supposed to be my golden ticket. I'd just started my junior year at Whitmore Academy, one of those elite prep schools where tuition costs more than most people's yearly salary. My parents had sacrificed everything to get me there. Dad working double shifts at the hospital, Mom tutoring kids on weekends. Theater was my thing, my escape, and I'd finally landed the lead role in our fall production of Macbeth, Mr. D. Holloway had been directing plays at Whitmore for 23 years, and everyone said getting a lead in one of his productions practically guaranteed admission to Juilliard or Yale drama. That Thursday afternoon in October, when 4 of us stayed late for an intensive rehearsal session, I thought I was living my dream. I had no idea I was walking into a nightmare that would leave one of us in a coma and the rest of us changed forever. The Black Box Theater sat in the basement of the Performing Arts Building, a windowless cube painted entirely in matte black. Just me, Tyler Washington, Sophia Martinez, and Jamie Park, the core cast members who needed extra work on the murder scenes. Mr. Holloway had seemed more intense than usual that week, his gray hair disheveled, his movements jerky and unpredictable. He'd been drinking coffee from the same thermos all day, pacing the halls between classes, muttering about artistic truth and authentic violence. When he locked the theater door behind us at 4:30 p.m., sliding the heavy bolt into place, Tyler actually laughed. "Method acting immersion, Mr. H?" he joked, adjusting his varsity jacket. But Mr. Holloway didn't smile back. His eyes had this glassy, unfocused quality, pupils dilated despite the harsh stage lights. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out something that made my breath catch. A Glock 19, the metal gleaming under the lights like a prop that had suddenly become terrifyingly real. "Nobody moves." His voice came out strange, like he was speaking through cotton. The gun wavered in his grip, but not enough to make any of us feel safe. Sophia's script fell from her hands, pages scattering across the black floor like dead leaves. Jamie took a step backward, bumping into one of the lighting stands. The metal pole crashed down and Mr. Holloway swung the gun toward the sound so fast we all flinched. "I said nobody moves!" Spit flew from his mouth. This wasn't the composed director who'd guided us through Shakespeare and Tennessee Williams for the past 2 years. This was someone else entirely, someone whose brain had been hijacked by whatever was coursing through his system. "We're going to rehearse Act 2, Scene 3, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead with his free hand. "The murder scene. And this time, you're going to make me believe it." Tyler tried to use his captain of the football team voice, the one that usually commanded respect. "Mr. Holloway, sir, maybe we should take a break. You seem stressed." "Wrong move." Mr. Holloway crossed the space between them in 3 quick strides and pressed the barrel of the gun against Tyler's temple. I could see Tyler's jaw muscles working, his whole body rigid with the effort of staying still. "Stressed?" Mr. Holloway whispered. "You want to see stressed? 23 years of teaching ungrateful brats who think they understand passion, who think they can phone in a performance and still call themselves artists." He pulled back slightly, waving the gun at all of us. "Today you learn what real stakes feel like. Today, you stop pretending to feel fear, and you actually feel it. Now get in position for the scene, or I start making some casting changes." The way he said casting changes while caressing the trigger made it clear exactly what kind of changes he meant. We scrambled into position, our movements clumsy with terror. The scene was supposed to show Macbeth's descent into madness after Duncan's murder, with Tyler as Macbeth, me as Lady Macbeth, and Sophia and Jamie as the servants discovering the body. My legs felt like water as I took my mark center stage. "Mr. Holloway dragged a metal folding chair to the edge of the performance space, the legs scraping against the floor with a sound that made my teeth hurt. He sat down heavily, gun resting on his thigh, finger never leaving the trigger guard. "Begin," he commanded. Tyler started his lines, but his voice cracked on the 3rd word. Mr. Holloway stood up so fast the chair toppled backward. "Pathetic!" He fired a shot into the ceiling. The sound in that enclosed space was devastating. My ears rang and plastered dust rained down on us like snow. Sophia screamed, and Jamie dropped to his knees, covering his head. "Get up," Mr. Holloway said, eerily calm now. "Get up and do it again. And this time I want to see real anguish, real guilt, real madness." The next hour became a blur of attempted performances, each one interrupted by Mr. Holloway's increasingly violent outbursts. When Jamie stumbled over a line, Mr. Holloway threw his thermos at him, the metal container splitting Jamie's lip open. Blood dripped onto his white shirt, creating a pattern that looked disturbingly appropriate for the murder scene. When Sophia's voice shook too much during her discovery of the body, he made her crawl across the floor while he counted down from 10, promising to shoot if she didn't reach the opposite wall in time. She made it with 2 seconds to spare, her palms scraped raw from the textured floor. But it was when I forgot my blocking and moved stage left instead of stage right that things went from terrifying to catastrophic. Mr. Holloway grabbed a handful of my hair and yanked me backward. "You think this is a game?" He hissed in my ear, his breath hot and sour with whatever chemicals were destroying his mind. "You think you can just mark through it like every other rehearsal?" He shoved me toward Tyler. "Hit her. Make me believe the violence. Make me believe you're capable of murder." Tyler's face went pale. We'd done stage combat before, carefully choreographed moves that looked real but never made actual contact. This was different. Mr. Holloway wanted real violence, real pain. "I won't do it," Tyler said, his voice steady despite the gun now pointed at his chest. Mr. Holloway's laugh was high and unhinged. "Then I'll give you some motivation." He swung the gun toward Sophia, who was huddled near the light board. "Every second you refuse, I get closer to pulling this trigger." He started counting. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Tyler looked at me, his eyes full of apology, and I gave him the slightest nod. Better a slap from Tyler than a bullet from Mr. Holloway. But when Tyler's palm connected with my cheek barely more than a tap, Mr. Holloway exploded. "That's not violence! That's not passion!" He rushed at Tyler, pistol whipping him across the face. Tyler went down hard, blood streaming from a gash above his eyebrow. That's when something shifted in the room. I could see it in Jamie's eyes, in the way Sophia's terror morphed into something harder, more calculating. We'd been victims for over an hour, but now, with Tyler bleeding on the floor and Mr. Holloway standing over him, ranting about artistic integrity while waving a loaded weapon, we realized something crucial. There were 4 of us, and 1 of him. He was high, unstable, his reflexes compromised by whatever cocktail of drugs was frying his synapses. If we were going to survive this, we had to stop being actors and start being fighters. Jamie was the first to move. While Mr. Holloway fixated on Tyler, Jamie quietly picked up one of the wooden rehearsal swords from the prop table. Not sharp, but solid oak, heavy enough to do damage. Sophia eased herself behind the lighting board, her fingers finding the master switch. I helped Tyler sit up, whispering in his ear to be ready. We didn't have a plan exactly, just a shared understanding that passed between us in glances and tiny gestures. We were done being directed. Mr. Holloway must have sensed the shift in energy because he spun around, eyes wild, gun sweeping the room. "What are you doing? Get back in position." But we were already moving. Sophia killed the lights, plunging us into absolute darkness. The Black Box Theater lived up to its name. Without the stage lights, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Mr. Holloway fired twice, the muzzle flashes creating brief snapshots of chaos. Jamie diving behind the prop table, Tyler rolling sideways despite his injury, me scrambling toward the sound equipment. The shots were deafening in the dark, leaving my ears ringing. But I heard Mr. Holloway stumbling, crashing into set pieces, cursing. Then came the sound I'd been hoping for, the meaty thunk of wood connecting with skull. Jamie had found his target. Mr. Holloway went down with a grunt, and I heard the gun skitter across the floor. Sophia brought the lights back up to maybe 20%, just enough to see shapes and shadows. What happened next still plays out in slow motion when I close my eyes. Mr. Holloway was on his hands and knees, blood running from a cut on his scalp, reaching for the gun that had slid under the costume rack. Tyler, despite the blood still flowing from his own wound, launched himself at our teacher, tackling him before he could grab the weapon. They rolled across the floor, Tyler using his football training to try to pin the older man down. But Mr. Holloway fought with the desperate strength of someone whose brain was on fire with chemicals and rage. He got his hands around Tyler's throat, squeezing, and I could see Tyler's face turning purple even in the dim light. Jamie swung the wooden sword again, but Mr. Holloway rolled at the last second, and it caught Tyler in the shoulder instead. That's when I did something I never thought I'd be capable of. I grabbed one of the heavy sandbags we used to weigh down the light stands, 40 pounds of canvas and sand, and brought it down on Mr. Holloway's head with every ounce of strength I had left. The sound it made was awful, like dropping a watermelon from a height. Mr. Holloway's hands released Tyler's throat instantly, and he collapsed face first onto the stage. Tyler gasped for air, rolling away, coughing and retching. For a moment, none of us moved. The only sounds were Tyler's ragged breathing and the buzz of the dimmed lights. Then Sophia was at the door, fumbling with the bolt, her hands slick with sweat. "I can't get it open," she sobbed. "He must have done something to it." Jamie kicked the gun away from Mr. Holloway's motionless form, sending it spinning into the far corner of the theater. I knelt beside our teacher, my hands trembling as I checked for a pulse. It was there, but weak and erratic. Blood pooled beneath his head, soaking into the black floor. "We need to call 911, I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. But our phones were in our bags, locked in the dressing room per Mr. Holloway's usual rehearsal rules. Tyler, still clutching his throat, stumbled to the theater's ancient intercom system mounted by the door. He pressed the button repeatedly, his voice hoarse but urgent. "This is the Black Box Theater. We need help. Medical emergency. Someone call 911. Nothing but static answered him. Jamie had found a crowbar in the tool closet and was attacking the door lock with desperate determination. Each clang of metal on metal felt like a countdown to something worse. Mr. Holloway groaned, his fingers twitching against the floor. Part of me wanted to hit him again to make sure he stayed down, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Sophia had torn strips from a costume to try to stop the bleeding from Tyler's head wound. We were all in shock, moving on autopilot when we finally heard it. Voices in the hallway, footsteps running, someone shouting about bolt cutters. The janitor had heard Tyler's intercom message on his radio. Within minutes, the door burst open, and suddenly the theater was full of people, security, paramedics, police. They took Mr. Holloway away on a stretcher, unconscious but alive. The rest of us were wrapped in shock blankets, separated for questioning, treated for our injuries. The aftermath unfolded in fragments. Mr. Holloway survived but slipped into a coma that lasted 3 weeks. When he finally woke up, he had no memory of that day in the theater. The toxicology report showed a dangerous mix of amphetamines and synthetic cannabinoids in his system. Apparently, he'd been self-medicating for chronic pain and depression, and something in that cocktail had triggered a complete psychotic break. Tyler needed surgery to repair damage to his trachea and spent 2 months in speech therapy. Jamie's split lip left a permanent scar that he still touches unconsciously when he's nervous. Sophia developed severe claustrophobia and couldn't enter a windowless room for over a year. As for me, I quit theater entirely. I couldn't look at a stage without seeing blood on black floors. Couldn't hear Shakespeare without remembering the weight of that sandbag in my hands. My parents wanted to sue the school, but I just wanted it to be over. Whitmore settled quietly with all our families, implementing new security measures and mandatory drug testing for faculty. Mr. Holloway was charged with 4 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. His lawyer argued diminished capacity due to the drug-induced psychosis, and he ended up pleading to lesser charges. 5 years in prison, out in 3 with good behavior. I heard he's teaching drama workshops at a community center in Oregon now, closely monitored, properly medicated. Sometimes I wonder if he ever dreams about that day, if somewhere in his subconscious he remembers demanding authentic violence and getting more than he bargained for. The other 3 and I stayed in touch for a while, trauma bonded in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there. But eventually, even that faded. Last I heard, Tyler was in law school. Jamie became an EMT, and Sophia was teaching elementary school art. We'd survived, we'd fought back, we'd made it out of that black box. But none of us ever set foot on a stage again. Some performances, it turns out, leave marks that never fully heal, no matter how much time passes or how far you run from the theater where they happened. I was working as a graphic designer at a small agency in Charlotte when everything went down. It was early September 2022, and I'd just moved into my first solo apartment after years of having roommates. Life felt like it was finally coming together. Decent job, my own space. Even managed to adopt a rescue cat named Mochi. I'd been single for about 8 months after a pretty rough breakup, and my friend Chloe had been pushing me to try online dating again. "Just give it a shot," she kept saying. "What's the worst that could happen?" Looking back now, I really wish I hadn't listened to her. But loneliness has a way of making you do things you normally wouldn't, and swiping through profiles seemed harmless enough at the time. His profile appeared on a Thursday evening while I was curled up on my couch, half watching some true crime documentary. Nathan Crawford, 29, entrepreneur and founder of a logistics software company. His photos showed this incredibly handsome guy with dark hair and these piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through the screen. Not in a creepy way, but in that confident, I know what I want kind of way. He had pictures of himself at tech conferences, one with him rock climbing, another at what looked like a charity gala in a perfectly fitted tuxedo. His bio was clever without trying too hard, building the future of supply chain tech by day, attempting to cook something edible by night, looking for someone who appreciates bad jokes and good wine. I remember hesitating for just a second before swiping right. Within minutes, we'd matched, and he'd already sent a message that made me laugh out loud. We texted for hours that first night, and it felt so natural, like talking to someone I'd known for years. He asked about my design work, seemed genuinely interested when I explained my latest project for a local brewery. He told me about his company, Streamline X, how he'd started it after working at Amazon and seeing all the inefficiencies in their system. The way he talked about his work was passionate but not obnoxious. He'd throw in self-deprecating jokes about his coding skills or how his business partner Jordan always had to fix his presentations. By midnight, my face hurt from smiling at my phone. We set up a date for Saturday afternoon, just coffee at this trendy place downtown. I spent Friday night trying on different outfits with Chloe, both of us giggling like we were back in college. "This one could be it," she said, adjusting my necklace. "I can feel it." The coffee date was supposed to last an hour. We stayed for 4. Nathan showed up looking even better than his photos, wearing this casual button-down and jeans that probably cost more than my entire outfit. But he wore them like he'd thrown them on without thinking. He brought me a small succulent in a hand-painted pot, said he'd noticed I had plants in one of my photos and thought I might like it. We talked about everything, our families. He was from Colorado, youngest of 3 boys, our worst roommate stories, our favorite places to travel. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, leaning in when you talked, remembering little details you'd mentioned. When the barista started stacking chairs around us, we realized we'd completely lost track of time. As we walked to our cars, he asked if he could see me again. "Tomorrow?" he suggested, and I didn't even pretend to think about it before saying yes. The next few weeks were like something out of a movie. Nathan would send flowers to my office. Not just roses, but these gorgeous exotic arrangements with birds of paradise and orchids. My coworkers started calling him Prince Charming, and honestly, that's what it felt like. He'd text me good morning every day at exactly 7:15, right before his early investor call. Dinners at restaurants I'd only seen on Instagram, surprise tickets to concerts, weekend trips to Asheville where we'd stay at these boutique hotels. But it wasn't just the expensive stuff. He'd show up at my apartment with takeout from my favorite Thai place after I'd had a rough day, or spend hours helping me brainstorm ideas for a difficult client. He even won over Mochi, who usually hated everyone. One night, about a month in, he told me he was falling for me. We were on his balcony. He had this stunning condo with a view of the skyline, and he just said it, simple and direct. "I know it's fast," he said, "but I've never felt this sure about anything." That's when the gifts started getting more elaborate. Designer handbags I'd mentioned liking in passing, jewelry that made me uncomfortable with how expensive it looked, plans for trips to places I'd only dreamed of visiting. He'd wave off my protests, saying his company had just closed a major deal with a Fortune 500 company. "Let me spoil you," he'd say, kissing my forehead. "I've been working nonstop for years to get to this point. Now I finally have someone worth sharing it with." He showed me mock-ups of Streamline X's interface, talked about expansion plans, even introduced me to Jordan over video call. Though looking back, Jordan barely said 3 words and kept his camera at a weird angle where you couldn't really see his face. But I was so caught up in the whirlwind of it all, these little strange moments just slipped by. Nathan started talking about meeting my parents over Thanksgiving. Maybe spending Christmas in Vail with his family. He'd pull up real estate listings on his phone, asking what I thought about different neighborhoods, just for fun. But his eyes would get this serious look that made my heart race. The first real red flag came on a Wednesday morning in early November. I was at work, rushing to finish a presentation, when my credit card got declined trying to buy lunch. Weird, I thought. I'd just paid it off. When I checked my statement, there were 3 charges I didn't recognize, all from high-end electronics stores totaling almost $4,000. My heart started pounding as I called the bank, but while I was on hold, Nathan texted me, "Baby, I'm so sorry. I accidentally used your card instead of mine for the company equipment. Transferring the money back now." Relief washed over me. These things happen, right? He sent a screenshot of the transfer confirmation, and sure enough, the money appeared in my account the next day. He felt so bad about it, he surprised me with a spa weekend. But something made me save that screenshot, just in case. That tiny seed of doubt planted itself even as I tried to ignore it. Then came the night everything unraveled. It was a random Thursday, and Nathan had canceled our dinner plans last minute. Another emergency investor meeting. I decided to order Vietnamese food and have a night in with mochi. While waiting for delivery, I got bored and did something I'd never done before. I Googled Streamline X logistics software. Nothing came up. Not a website, not a LinkedIn page, not even a mention in any tech blogs. My mouth went dry. I tried different combinations. Streamline X Charlotte, Nathan Crawford Streamline X, Streamline X funding. Nothing. With shaking fingers, I reverse searched his profile photos. The rock climbing one popped up on a stock photo site. The conference photo belonged to someone named Adrian Petrov. The charity gala picture was from a dentist's Instagram in Miami. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Who the hell had I been dating for the past 2 months? I spent the next 3 hours in a research spiral that made me physically sick. Using what I knew about him, his phone number, the few personal details he'd shared, I found more inconsistencies. The Colorado address he'd mentioned didn't exist. The brothers he talked about, the college he claimed to attend, even the name of his supposed dog from childhood, all lies. But then I found something that made everything else pale in comparison. On a forum for romance scam victims, there was a post from 8 months ago. A woman named Jessica from Atlanta described meeting a tech entrepreneur named Blake Summers, who looked exactly like Nathan. Same photos, similar company story, same pattern of expensive gifts and grand promises. She'd lost $30,000 before discovering the truth. Another comment mentioned someone called Ryan Foster in Dallas. Same guy, different name. My Vietnamese food sat untouched on the counter as I read story after story. The man I thought I knew had been doing this for years, changing names and cities like costumes. The worst part was finding Brianna's story. She'd dated him under the name Christopher Lang in Nashville just last year. Unlike the others who lost money, Brianna had confronted him when she discovered his real identity. She'd arranged to meet him at a public restaurant, planning to end things safely. But he must have suspected something because her coffee tasted strange, and the next thing she remembered was waking up in her car 12 hours later with no memory of how she got there. The hospital found traces of Rohypnol in her system. She'd filed a police report, but he'd vanished. Reading her words, I felt ice spreading through my chest. This wasn't just some con artist taking money. This was someone dangerous. I looked at the designer purse he'd given me sitting on my counter, and it suddenly looked sinister, like evidence of something terrible. My phone buzzed. Nathan. Missing you tonight, beautiful. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I stared at the message, realizing I was supposed to go to his condo the next evening. The thought of being alone with him now made me want to throw up. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I contacted every woman from the forum who'd left an email address, and by morning I had a group chat with 4 victims. They shared screenshots, photos, voice messages, all proof that Nathan Crawford was actually someone named Trevor Constantine, a 34-year-old con artist with warrants in 3 states. The FBI had a file on him, but he was slippery, always moving before they could catch up. One woman, Marie from Houston, had hired a private investigator who discovered Trevor had at least 12 known aliases and had stolen over $400,000 from women across the country. But money wasn't his only goal. He got off on the control, the manipulation. Marie sent me a recording she'd secretly made during their last conversation, and hearing that familiar voice talking about teaching her a lesson for snooping around made bile rise in my throat. We formulated a plan together. I would ghost him completely. No explanation, no confrontation, just disappear. Block him everywhere, change my locks, alert building security. The other women had learned the hard way that confronting him only made things worse. But Trevor wasn't someone who accepted being ignored. When I didn't respond to his texts that Friday, they escalated from sweet to concerned to angry. By Saturday, he was calling from different numbers, leaving voicemails that alternated between tearful apologies for whatever he'd done wrong and cold threats about how I'd regret treating him this way. He showed up at my office on Monday, all charm with the receptionist claiming to be my fiancé with a surprise. Thank God I'd warned them, and security escorted him out. That's when I found the AirTag hidden in the lining of that designer purse. He'd been tracking me the whole time. The police said without concrete proof of a crime, their hands were tied. The credit card fraud? He'd returned the money. The threats? Too vague to prosecute. Even Brianna's drugging case couldn't stick because she couldn't prove he'd done it. I was trapped, waiting for him to either give up or escalate. For 2 weeks, I stayed with different friends, never in one place more than 2 nights. The other women in the group chat became my lifeline, talking me through the panic attacks, sharing their own stories of survival. Finally, after 3 weeks of silence, Marie messaged us that he'd been arrested in Phoenix trying to run the same scam. A woman there had been smarter than all of us. She'd recorded everything from day one and caught him admitting to the frauds on tape. He got 5 years, but with good behavior, he'll probably be out in 3. I still jump when my phone rings from unknown numbers, still check my rearview mirror more than necessary. The gifts he gave me. I donated everything except that first succulent, which died anyway, probably from my negative energy. The other women and I still keep in touch, a strange sisterhood born from shared trauma. We warn others when we can, sharing our story on forums and support groups. I've gone back to therapy, working through the trust issues and the shame of falling for someone so completely fake. My therapist says victims of con artists often struggle with self-blame. But the truth is, these predators are experts at manipulation. They study human psychology, know exactly what to say and when to say it. Trevor had probably been refining his act for over a decade. Sometimes I wonder who he really is underneath all those personas, but then I realize it doesn't matter. What matters is that I got out before he could do worse, that I found those other women, that we stopped him from hurting anyone else for a while. I'm dating again now, very slowly, and I verify everything. Maybe that's paranoid, but I'd rather be paranoid than go through that again. And if you're reading this thinking it could never happen to you, that's exactly what I thought too. Working at a mid-sized marketing firm in Cincinnati was supposed to be my dream job. Fresh out of college in 2017, I'd landed a position as a junior graphic designer, and honestly, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The office had that startup vibe, ping pong table in the break room, casual Fridays that stretched into casual every day, and co-workers who actually seemed to care about each other. I was 24, living in my first apartment without roommates, and finally feeling like a real adult. My biggest worry back then was whether my rescue mutt Biscuit was getting enough walks while I pulled overtime on client presentations. One of the senior account managers, Gregory Lawson, took me under his wing from day one. He was in his early 30s, always impeccably dressed even on casual days, with this infectious enthusiasm that made even the most boring client brief sound exciting. Gregory had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room when he talked to you. Intense eye contact, leaning in close, remembering every little detail you'd mentioned weeks ago. At first, I thought it was just good people skills. He'd bring me coffee exactly how I liked it, stay late to help me with projects, and always made sure to publicly praise my work in team meetings. Looking back, I should have noticed how his helpfulness always came with strings attached. How he'd sulk if I grabbed lunch with other coworkers instead of him, or how his compliments always felt slightly possessive. Everything changed on a Thursday in March. I'd been working there for about 8 months when Gregory cornered me in the supply closet. I was reaching for printer paper when he blocked the doorway, that usual charming smile replaced with something darker. He started saying how I owed him for all his mentoring, how I'd been leading him on by accepting his help. When I tried to squeeze past him, he grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to leave marks, but firm enough to make his point. The smell of his cologne, which I'd once found pleasant, suddenly made me nauseous. I managed to pull away and told him we should keep things professional. The look he gave me then, it was like watching a mask slip off. Pure rage flashed across his face before he smoothed his features back into that practiced smile and said, "Of course, I must have misread the situation." I reported the incident to HR the next morning. My supervisor, Janet, took it seriously. She had me write out a detailed statement, and they pulled the security footage from that hallway. Turns out I wasn't the first person to complain about Gregory. 2 former interns had filed similar reports that somehow never went anywhere. But with my statement and the video evidence, they finally had enough. By Monday, Gregory's desk was cleared out, and we received a brief email stating he was no longer with the company. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could just move on with my life and forget about the whole uncomfortable situation. God, I was naive. The first email arrived exactly 2 weeks after Gregory's termination. I remember because it was a Friday afternoon, and I was wrapping up a logo design for a local brewery. The subject line simply read, "You destroyed me." No sender name, just a string of random numbers and letters for an email address. The message itself was short but chilling. "You think you won? You ruined my career, my reputation, my entire life. But I know where you live. I know your routine. I know that pathetic dog you walk every morning at 6:15. You'll pay for what you did to me." I stared at the screen, reading it over and over. Part of me wanted to believe it was spam, some weird coincidence. But deep down, I knew. The mention of Biscuit, the specific time I walked him, only someone who'd been watching me would know those details. I showed the email to Janet immediately. She contacted corporate legal, and they advised me to file a police report. The officer who took my statement, a tired-looking guy named Officer Brenner, seemed skeptical. "Could be anyone," he said, barely glancing up from his notepad. "These anonymous emails are nearly impossible to trace. Change your passwords, vary your routine, and let us know if anything escalates." Escalates? Like this wasn't already terrifying enough. That weekend, I installed a doorbell camera and started taking different routes to walk Biscuit. I even considered staying with my parents in Indiana for a while, but I didn't want Gregory, if it was Gregory, to think he'd won. Plus, I had presentations due Monday, and I couldn't exactly design for my childhood bedroom with its dial-up internet. Monday morning hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd parked in the company garage like always, running a few minutes late because I'd taken a longer route to work. When I finally found my car on level 3, my heart sank. Deep scratches ran along the entire driver's side, spelling out one word: liar. The security guard called it in, but the cameras in that section had mysteriously malfunctioned over the weekend. The emails started coming daily after that. Different addresses each time, but always the same venomous tone. "You're not as smart as you think. I see you changed your route, cute. Blue dress today, trying to impress someone new?" Each message contained details that confirmed my worst fear. Someone was following me, studying me, documenting my every move. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening in April. I'd stayed late at the office, partly to finish a project, but mostly because I felt safer there than alone in my apartment. Around 8:30, I finally headed to the parking garage. The place was nearly empty, just a few cars scattered across the dimly lit space. I'd made it halfway to my car when I heard footsteps echoing behind me. Slow, deliberate, matching my pace. When I walked faster, they sped up. When I stopped, they stopped. I fumbled for my keys, that new pepper spray keychain Janet had given me clutched in my sweaty palm. Just as I reached my car, the footsteps broke into a run. I spun around, ready to spray, but saw only shadows. Then I noticed it. A piece of paper tucked under my windshield wiper. "Stop hiding behind security cameras. Let's settle this face to face." My whole body shook as I grabbed the note and practically dove into my car, locking the doors and peeling out of there like my life depended on it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my apartment building, every car passing by, every shadow outside my window sent my heart racing. Around 3 a.m., I finally dozed off on my couch with Biscuit curled up beside me. I woke up to him growling, something he never did. The apartment was dark except for the glow from my laptop screen. I'd left it open on the coffee table, But now there was a document open that I hadn't created. Just one line, typed over and over. "You can't hide from me, you can't hide from me, you can't hide from me." My blood turned to ice. Someone had been in my apartment. While I was sleeping, I grabbed Biscuit and my phone, locked myself in the bathroom, and called 911. The police found no signs of forced entry, but my spare key, the one I kept hidden under a fake rock by my door, was missing. The next morning, Thursday, I didn't go to work. I couldn't. Janet understood and suggested I work from home for a few days. I spent the morning at the locksmith, getting every lock changed, then drove to my parents' house to drop off Biscuit. I couldn't risk anything happening to him. On my way back, driving down Route 32 around 2 p.m., a black sedan appeared in my rearview mirror. It stayed exactly 3 car lengths behind me, matching every lane change, every turn. When I sped up to test my paranoia, it sped up. When I signaled to exit, it signaled too. My exit was coming up in a mile when the sedan suddenly accelerated, swerving into my lane and clipping my back bumper. My car spun out, tires screaming against asphalt. I managed to regain control just before hitting the guardrail, but the sedan was already speeding away. My hands trembled so violently I could barely dial 911. This time, Officer Brenner took me seriously. The investigation moved quickly after that. A traffic camera had caught the sedan's license plate, a rental car paid for with a prepaid credit card, but the rental company had security footage of the person picking it up. When Officer Brenner showed me the grainy image, I didn't need to see the face clearly. That distinctive way of standing, the pressed shirt even for a casual car rental, the way he drummed his fingers on the counter, it was Gregory. They tracked the credit card purchases to a motel just outside the city limits. The police found him there with what they called a shrine of information about me. Printed screenshots of my social media, photos taken from afar, detailed logs of my daily activities going back weeks. He'd created 17 different email accounts to harass me. His laptop contained drafts of emails he hadn't sent yet, each one more disturbing than the last, detailing exactly what he planned to do to make me understand what I'd taken from him. Gregory was arrested that same day. He pleaded guilty to stalking, harassment, and attempted vehicular assault to avoid a trial. Got 3 years in prison and a permanent restraining order. The company hired security to walk employees to their cars for months afterward. I stayed in therapy for a year, learning to trust my instincts again and stop looking behind me every few steps. Gregory was just a coworker who helped me with projects, until he wasn't. The thing that still haunts me isn't just what he did, it's how normal he seemed for those 8 months. How many times we laughed over coffee, how genuinely helpful he was with my career, how absolutely certain everyone was that he was one of the good guys. These days I work for a different company, in a different city. Biscuit and I take our morning walks whenever we want, no schedule. And I've learned that when someone's helpfulness comes with conditions, when their kindness feels like a debt you're accumulating, trust that instinct. It might just save your life. My brother Cameron had always been different, but that weekend at the Airbnb changed everything. I'm a nurse at a small clinic in Reno, Nevada, and I've seen my share of disturbing things, but nothing prepared me for what happened during what was supposed to be a peaceful family getaway. Cameron was 21, still living with our parents after dropping out of community college. He spent most of his time in the basement, glued to his laptop, watching medical documentaries on repeat. Mom thought he was just going through a phase, maybe considering medical school. Dad was less optimistic but figured a change of scenery might help snap him out of whatever funk he'd fallen into. The rental property sat 3 hours north of Reno, nestled in the mountains near a town barely big enough to have its own gas station. The photos online showed a beautiful cabin with floor-to-ceiling windows and a converted garage that the owners had transformed into a game room. For $200 a night, it seemed like a steal for a place that could accommodate 8 people. Cameron barely reacted when we told him about the trip, just gave a slight nod and returned to his screen. I caught a glimpse of what he was watching, some graphic surgery footage that made even me, with my medical background, feel queasy. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in late July. The cabin exceeded expectations, rustic but modern, surrounded by towering pines that blocked out most of the neighboring properties. Cameron actually seemed interested when he discovered the garage game room had been set up like a workshop, with a long metal table and overhead lighting that reminded me of an operating room. While Mom and Dad unpacked groceries, I watched him run his fingers along the table's surface, measuring distances with his hands, mumbling calculations under his breath. He'd brought a duffel bag that seemed oddly heavy, which he immediately stashed in the corner of the garage before anyone could ask about it. That first night passed without incident. We grilled steaks on the deck, played board games, even got Cameron to join us for a few rounds of cards. He kept excusing himself to check on something in the garage, claiming he'd seen mice and wanted to make sure they weren't getting into our food supplies. Dad joked that Cameron was finally showing some practical initiative. Around 11, my parents decided to drive into town to check out the local bar. Apparently, they had live music on weekends. They asked if Cameron and I wanted to join, but we both declined. I was exhausted from a long week of shifts, and Cameron said he had a headache. 20 minutes after they left, I heard strange noises coming from the garage. At first, I thought maybe he'd turned on the TV in there, but the sounds were too irregular. Metallic clinks followed by a low whimpering that made my skin prickle. I knocked on the garage door, but Cameron didn't answer. When I tried the handle, it was locked from the inside. Through the small window, I could see him hunched over the metal table, wearing what looked like dish gloves and one of my surgical masks he must have taken from my work bag. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows, and I could make out something small and dark on the table. Then I heard it clearly, a dog's pained yelp. I pounded on the door, screaming his name, threatening to call the police if he didn't open up immediately. The door finally swung open, and the smell hit me first. That distinctive copper scent of blood mixed with something chemical, like cleaning solution. Cameron stood there in a plastic apron splattered with dark stains, his eyes bright with an excitement I'd never seen before. On the table behind him lay a medium-sized mutt, its gray fur matted with blood, breathing shallow and rapid. He'd made precise incisions along its abdomen, the skin pulled back and pinned like I'd seen in anatomy textbooks. "I fixed him," Cameron said, his voice eerily calm. He had something wrong inside. I could tell by the way he walked when I gave him the hamburger. My nursing instincts kicked in, and I rushed to the poor animal, but I could see it was too late. Whatever Cameron had done, the damage was catastrophic. I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he understood what he'd done, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. There was no remorse, no recognition that he'd done something horrible, just pure fascination as he watched the dog's labored breathing. I grabbed my phone to call 911, but Cameron moved faster than I'd ever seen him move, knocking it from my hand. "You can't," he said, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. "They won't understand. I'm getting better at this. I've been practicing." That's when I noticed his duffel bag was open, and inside I could see rolls of surgical instruments, bottles of veterinary anesthetic, and what looked like anatomy diagrams he'd drawn himself. The sound of our parents' car pulling into the driveway broke the spell. Cameron's grip loosened, and I yanked my arm away, backing toward the door. "Clean this up," I hissed, my voice shaking. "Clean it up right now, or I swear to God, Cameron." He nodded slowly, that unsettling brightness never leaving his eyes. I stumbled out of the garage and met our parents at the front door, forcing a smile and claiming I was heading to bed with a migraine. Mom fussed over me. Dad made jokes about the local band being terrible, and all the while I could hear Cameron moving around in the garage, the sound of plastic rustling and water running. I lay awake until dawn, my door locked, jumping at every creak in the house. The next morning, I found the garage spotless. The metal table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, smelling strongly of bleach. Cameron sat at the kitchen table eating cereal like nothing had happened, chatting with Dad about football scores. I pulled Mom aside while they talked, but before I could get the words out, Cameron appeared at my shoulder. "I buried it," he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. "Behind the tool shed, nobody will find it." His breath smelled like mint toothpaste, but underneath I caught something else, that same chemical smell from the night before. Mom asked if everything was all right, and I found myself nodding, unable to form words with Cameron's steady gaze boring into me. Dad suggested a hike after breakfast, one of those family bonding activities he always pushed when we were together. Cameron volunteered to stay behind, claiming he felt queasy from something he ate. I should have insisted we all stay together. I should have found a way to get us out of that cabin right then. Instead, I let myself believe that maybe I'd overreacted, that maybe the shock of seeing what he'd done had finally gotten through to him. We left around 10 in the morning for a trail that would take us 3 hours round trip. When we returned, Dad's car was gone from the driveway. Mom called out for Cameron as we entered the house, but only silence answered. His bedroom was empty, bed still made. The garage door stood slightly ajar. Inside the garage, we found Cameron's laptop open on the metal table, playing a video on loop. The timestamp showed it was recorded that morning, just minutes after we'd left for our hike. In the grainy footage, Cameron spoke directly to the camera, explaining in that same calm voice how he'd been practicing for months, how the bullying in high school had taught him that people were just biological machines that could be taken apart and understood. Behind him on the table lay surgical instruments arranged with obsessive precision. The video cut to black, then resumed with Cameron filming the driveway as Dad's car pulled up. "Subject presented itself," Cameron's voice narrated. "Male, approximately 55 years old, showing signs of lower back distress. Intervention necessary." The screen went dark again. Mom's scream brought me back to reality. We called the police immediately. They found Dad's car abandoned on a dirt road 8 miles from the cabin, keys still in the ignition, driver door hanging open. Search teams combed the woods for 2 days before they discovered Cameron's makeshift operating site in a small cave near an abandoned mine shaft. Dad was there, alive but in critical condition, with surgical incisions across his lower back that somehow, miraculously, had missed major organs and arteries. Cameron was nowhere to be found. The investigators uncovered dozens of videos on hidden drives in the garage, documentation of his descent into madness, starting with small animals and building up to elaborate fantasies about fixing the people who had wronged him. They found journal entries dating back years, filled with anatomical drawings and detailed plans. Dad survived, though he never fully recovered mobility in his legs. We moved away from Nevada, changed our names, tried to start over. Cameron was spotted twice over the following years, once in Montana and once in Wyoming, but he always vanished before authorities could close in. I still wake up sometimes, certain I can hear that metallic clinking sound, wondering if he's out there somewhere, looking for more subjects to fix. The night this happened, I was finishing up a long shift at a pet clinic just outside Roanoke, Virginia. I was working as a tech assistant back then, mostly dealing with emergencies and late-night drop-offs, so my hours were all over the place. That night had been especially rough. 2 surgeries back-to-back and a dog that didn't make it. I hadn't eaten since lunchtime, and by the time I clocked out, the only place still open nearby was this 24-hour diner tucked between a tire shop and a liquor store. It had those buzzing neon signs that flicker like they're half asleep, and a handful of booths that always seem too sticky no matter how much they're wiped down. I sat at a booth by the window, where the light hit the glass just right to show all the grease smudges. There were 2 guys at the counter talking low over coffee, and 1 waitress with heavy eyeliner scribbling on a notepad. I ordered a grilled cheese and fries, comfort food, nothing complicated. I remember scrolling through my phone, zoning out, when I caught someone standing by the door out of the corner of my eye. He didn't come in right away, just stood there, backlit by the sign outside, like he was trying to decide whether or not to enter. Then, without looking around, He walked straight toward my booth. He was wearing a tan jacket with a stain on the right sleeve and had this thick mustache that looked like something out of a 70s cop show. He stopped at my table and smiled like he'd been expecting me. "Claire?" he asked. I shook my head, said he had the wrong person. But he just chuckled, like I was playing coy, and sat down across from me without asking. "Come on, you don't have to pretend," he said, tapping 2 fingers on the table like he was waiting for a drink to show up. "It's been a long time since Fairview, huh?" I'd never been to Fairview in my life. I told him again that he had the wrong person, trying to keep my voice calm, but he leaned in, elbows on the table, and started asking me things, personal things. Stuff like where I was living now, whether I still had that little dog, if I was still seeing that guy with the pickup. I remember my throat getting dry because these weren't random questions. They were specific enough to feel real, even though none of them applied to me. I kept saying no, kept trying to signal the waitress, but she was in the back, and the guys at the counter hadn't noticed anything. That's when I decided I wasn't waiting around anymore. I needed to get out. I slid out of the booth without finishing my fries and told him I had to be somewhere. He didn't move at first, just sat there watching me with that same expression, like he knew something I didn't. I pushed the door open and stepped into the parking lot. The cold air hit me harder than I expected, and I remember thinking how quiet it suddenly felt out there. The diner was set back from the road a bit, and most of the nearby shops were closed, their windows dark. As I walked toward my car, I heard the door creak open behind me. I didn't look back. I just picked up my pace. My car was parked under one of those dim orange lights that flicker more than they actually help. I dug into my pocket for my keys, but my fingers weren't cooperating. That stupid panic where everything feels slower than it should. I heard footsteps now, clear as day. Crunching gravel. Not rushed. Steady. Like whoever it was didn't feel the need to run. I turned just enough to see him coming. Same jacket, same weird mustache, walking like he had all the time in the world. Before I could even get the key into the door, someone called out, loud, "Hey!" It was the cook from the diner. Big guy, bald, arms covered in faded tattoos. I hadn't even noticed him before, but there he was, walking fast across the lot toward us. The man in the jacket stopped dead, then took a step back like nothing had happened. "Is there a problem here?" the cook asked, looking straight at him. The guy didn't answer. Just gave this lazy shrug, said something like, "Thought she was someone else," and turned around. He didn't go back into the diner. He walked across the street and disappeared behind the liquor store. The cook stayed with me while I got in the car. He didn't ask questions, didn't try to make it into a thing, just said, "You need to be careful out here." I thanked him, still shaken, and sat there behind the wheel for a minute before driving off. I didn't go straight home. I drove around for a bit, made sure I wasn't being followed. I kept replaying the questions he asked, wondering if maybe he had confused me with someone for real. But the more I thought about it, the less it felt like a mistake. It felt rehearsed, like he'd done it before. The next morning, I couldn't shake it. I called the diner to thank the cook, his name was Daryl, and ended up telling him I was thinking of filing a report. He said I should, and that he'd back it up if needed. I went to the local police station that afternoon and gave them every detail I could remember, what he looked like, what he said, even the way he walked. The officer I spoke to didn't roll his eyes or brush it off, which surprised me a little. Instead, he asked me to wait, and brought someone else in, a detective. That's when I realized this wasn't just about me. Turns out there had been a string of similar incidents in the past couple months. Women, usually alone late at night, being approached by a man matching that same general description. Always a different name, always familiar questions. In 2 cases, the women made it to their cars, but the guy had followed them for miles. Another woman hadn't been so lucky. She'd been dragged behind a building near a gas station before a passerby scared him off. He was never caught. When they asked if I'd be willing to look at some photos, I said yes without hesitating. They showed me a lineup of mugshots, and I recognized him instantly. His name wasn't even close to what I expected. Earl Camden, early 50s, with a long list of arrests going back 2 decades. Mostly loitering, trespassing, harassment. Nothing that stuck long enough to keep him off the streets. But now they were taking it seriously. After my report and Daryl's statement, they managed to pull security footage from the diner's parking lot. It was grainy, but you could clearly see him following me out. That was enough for a warrant. A few days later, they picked him up behind a laundromat 3 towns over. I still don't know why he picked me that night, or what would have happened if Daryl hadn't stepped in. I never saw Earl again, and I hope I never do. But I changed a lot after that. I stopped going anywhere alone that late, even if it meant skipping dinner or driving farther. I started checking my surroundings in ways I hadn't before. I know some people might read this and think I got lucky, and maybe I did. But what scares me most is how ordinary it all felt at first. Just a quiet night, a greasy diner, and a stranger who acted like he knew my life better than I did. It's been a few years since all of this unraveled, but I still get occasional messages from women who found me through screenshots or comment threads. I'm not sure what exactly pushed me to post this now. Maybe just the fact that he's still out there. Back then, I lived in a small duplex on the outskirts of St. Cloud, Minnesota, working part-time at a veterinary clinic while finishing up my certification in dental hygiene. My life was quiet in that comfortable, dull kind of way. I wasn't really looking for anyone, but when I met Eli Sutton through a mutual friend's camping trip, he had this incredibly relaxed, almost too perfect way of making everyone feel like they'd known him for years. He wasn't flashy, didn't overtalk. That's probably what made people trust him faster. Eli said he worked in logistics for a commercial freight company, something to do with coordinating truck routes between states. He'd pull out his phone to answer work texts in the middle of dinner or a movie night, always peppered with just enough complaint to sound real. Said he was originally from Michigan, had moved around a lot because of work. I didn't think to question any of it. His stories were mundane enough to pass as truth. Looking back, that was part of his charm. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just believable. We dated for about 8 months before things got weird. Not all at once, more like a drawer that starts sticking before it jams completely. He started showing up at my place late, sometimes with a limp or a wrapped wrist. Once, he said he'd gotten mugged coming out of a gas station in Wisconsin. Another time, it was a slipped disc that made him avoid driving for a week. I tried to be supportive, but he'd brush off questions with vague answers or change the subject to something more emotional, like how lonely he'd been before he met me. It wasn't until I noticed some inconsistencies in the way he'd talk about work that I felt the first real crack in the facade. One night I saw an email pop up on his laptop while he was in the shower. It was a Gmail notification for a different name, Caleb B., linked to a Venmo account I'd never heard of. I clicked it open before I could talk myself out of it. The inbox was full of messages from different women. Some of them were short and angry, others emotional, long, full of confusion. I screenshotted as much as I could, sent them to myself, and when he came back into the room, I pretended I was half asleep. The next morning, he was gone. I mean, completely. Drawers empty, phone off, socials wiped. That was the last time I saw him in person. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself I was just overthinking, but the screenshots said otherwise. I reverse-searched one of the usernames tied to a message he'd received, and that led me to a private Instagram account. The profile photo was of a woman standing in front of a mural I recognized from a cafe in Milwaukee. I sent a short, cautious DM explaining I might have information about someone she knew. I wasn't expecting an answer, but she replied that same evening. "Are you talking about Caleb or Eric?" My heart was pounding when I read it. She told me to call her. Her name was Dana, and we ended up talking for 2 hours straight. She said she met Eric Shaw, his name to her, on a dating app the year before. Same type of guy. Attentive, funny, strangely private about some things, but open in ways that made you feel special. He'd told her he had a rare heart condition and needed time off work. She helped him pay for a few emergency medications he couldn't afford because of some gap in his insurance. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. It added up to almost $3,000 before she caught on. When she confronted him, he ghosted her. Just vanished. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying our call, thinking about the way he used those same soft pauses, the little jokes, the wounded vulnerability. I dug deeper, found 2 more accounts on LinkedIn and Facebook with different versions of his face, same photo style, just slightly different haircuts or names. One was Daniel Court, who claimed to be a freelance photographer. Another was Micah Grant, listed as a startup consultant based in Chicago. I created a burner account and messaged both profiles. Unsurprisingly, neither responded. But the friend lists? That was a gold mine. I recognized at least 2 more women from the email screenshots. A week later, I got on a Zoom call with one of them, Erin, a high school English teacher from Iowa. She looked so tired when the camera turned on. Her story wasn't just sad, it was infuriating. She'd been in a long-distance relationship with Micah for almost a year. He'd told her he'd gotten a job offer in her city and convinced her to help him co-sign on a short-term lease while he finalized the paperwork. He never showed up. She's still paying the penalties for breaking the lease alone. Her words stuck with me. I think he studies people, like he figures out what kind of tragedy you'll fall for. At that point, I started keeping track of everything, not in some obsessive spreadsheet, but just in a notebook I kept by my bed. Every name, every detail, every lie that overlapped or contradicted the others. I wasn't trying to build a case exactly, but it felt like if I stopped, I'd lose my grip on what had actually happened to me. There were so many overlaps in the stories. Same jokes, same excuses, same vague childhood tales. I even found a pattern in the way he recycled job titles. Always something that sounded impressive but difficult to verify, like independent logistics consultant or remote systems analyst. Eventually, I filed a police report in my county, even though I knew it wouldn't go far. Dana and Aaron had done the same in their states, but since the money involved didn't hit some magic threshold, and since he used fake names for everything, there wasn't much they could do. One detective was honest with me and said, "Guys like this float. They vanish until they need something again." That line stayed with me. It made him sound like something parasitic, something half alive that just drifts until it finds another person soft enough to sink into. I took a long break from dating after that. I moved apartments, changed my number, nuked my old social accounts. Every now and then I still get messages from other women, some who found his face in old photos or Reddit threads, asking if I knew him as Jared or Noah or even Ellis. The answer is always yes, I know him. Not fully, not in the way you think you know a person when you love them, but I've seen enough pieces to know what he is. Someone who builds entire versions of himself based on what he thinks you need. Someone who doesn't just lie. He curates false lives like other people curate playlists. The last time I heard about him, he'd been spotted in a co-working space in Minneapolis under yet another name, Reed Carter. He was apparently pitching a new app to some freelancers. I didn't follow up. I didn't want to get pulled back in. The only reason I'm sharing this now is in case someone out there is Googling his latest alias in the middle of the night, confused and anxious, and trying to make sense of what just happened to them. If that's you, you're not crazy and you're not alone, just be careful. He knows how to make himself feel real.